Admiral Keresh of the Valdorian Hegemony stood before the holodisplay in his pristine command chamber, 6 arms folded behind his crystalline back, watching the small blue planet rotate slowly on the screen. Earth. A backwater world in an unremarkable system, populated by a species that had barely crawled out of their gravity well. They refuse. His voice carried the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. Yes, Admiral, his aide, a nervous Thraxian with twitching antennae, stammered. The humans have declined our generous offer of protection. They claim they need no guardianship. Keresh's laugh was like breaking glass. For 3,000 years, the Valdorian Hegemony had extended their benevolent rule across the galaxy. Species after species had gratefully accepted their guidance, their protection, their wisdom. The alternative was always unpleasant. Curious, he mused, studying the data streams. Their technology is primitive. No faster-than-light communication. Their weapons are chemical-based projectiles. They haven't even unified their own planet. The aide nodded eagerly. Our scouts report constant warfare among their various factions. They appear to be a fractured, violent species with no concept of proper governance. Keresh smiled, revealing teeth like polished obsidian. Then we shall teach them. He turned to the tactical display where 300 Valdorian warships waited in perfect formation. Each vessel could level a continent. Together, they could crack a planet's crust. Signal the fleet. Begin the pacification of Sol 3. Standard protocol. Minimal casualties. We want workers, not corpses. What Admiral Keresh didn't know was that 3 days earlier, in a bunker deep beneath the Colorado mountains, General Sarah Chen had received a very different kind of transmission. "Ma'am," the communications officer said, voice tight with controlled fear. "You need to see this." The message was simple. Clinical. A demand disguised as an offer. Submit to Valdorian protection or face the consequences. Join the Galactic community under their guidance or be brought into it by force. Chen stared at the alien script scrolling across her screen. Around her, the Strategic Defense Command fell silent. Every officer, every analyst, every tech specialist waited for her response. She was small, compact, with graying hair and scars on her hands from her days as a combat engineer. She'd seen war. Real war. The kind where soldiers died choking on their own blood in trenches filled with mud and shrapnel. "How long until they arrive?" she asked quietly. 72 hours, ma'am. Maybe less. Chen nodded once. Then she did something that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. She smiled. "Activate Protocol Lazarus," she said. "All defense grids, all black sites, everything we've built in the shadows. It's time the galaxy learned what humans do when cornered." The communications officer hesitated. "Ma'am, that protocol was designed for exactly this," Chen cut him off. "An extinction-level threat from outside our solar system. Send the activation codes." Her fingers moved across the command console with practiced precision. Across Earth, systems that had been dormant for decades began to wake up. In hidden facilities carved into asteroids, weapon platforms that had never been officially acknowledged started their power-up sequences. Chen turned to her staff. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 days to show these aliens why evolution made humans the apex predator on a planet full of things that wanted to eat us." The Valdorian fleet dropped out of hyperspace on schedule. 300 ships arranged in a traditional intimidation formation, weapons powered but not aimed. Standard doctrine for a primitive species. Show overwhelming force, accept their surrender, begin the integration process. Admiral Keresh reviewed the tactical display with satisfaction. The humans had made no attempt to flee their system. Their primitive space installations continued their normal operations. A few military satellites had gone silent, but that was expected. Probably a communication breakdown caused by fear. "Begin the demonstration," he ordered. The lead dreadnought fired a single particle beam at the human moon. Not to destroy it, just to carve a canyon visible from Earth. A gentle reminder of what resistance would cost. The beam lanced through space, a column of pure energy that could vaporize mountains. It struck something 50,000 kilometers from the moon's surface. The explosion lit up the solar system like a newborn star. "What was that?" Keresh demanded, his calm finally cracking. "Unknown, Admiral. Some kind of defensive screen. But our sensors showed nothing." The second explosion cut him off. One of their destroyers simply ceased to exist, vaporized by a kinetic projectile moving at 90% light speed. Then a third ship died. Then a fourth. Evasive maneuvers. Keresh screamed. All ships, combat formation. But the Valdorian fleet had been built for intimidation, not warfare. They hadn't fought a real battle in centuries. Their crews were administrators, not warriors. They'd grown soft on 1,000 surrenders. The humans had grown hard on 10,000 wars. From hidden bases in the asteroid belt, rail guns fired projectiles the size of telephone poles. From orbital platforms disguised as defunct satellites, particle accelerators carved through Valdorian shields like they were made of tissue paper. From launch tubes buried in the lunar surface, swarms of autonomous hunters sought their targets with mechanical precision. Admiral Keresh watched his fleet die in real time. Ships that had conquered star systems were being torn apart by weapons his sensors couldn't even detect until they fired. "How?" he whispered. "How do they have this technology?" On Earth, General Chen stood in her command bunker, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Around her, officers coordinated the defense with the calm efficiency of a species that had been killing each other for millennia. "Sector 7, we've got 3 heavies moving to flank. Vector them into the Orion field." "Roger, Sector 7. Orion batteries coming online." "Ma'am, we're detecting escape pods." "Should we let them go?" Chen said quietly. "Someone needs to tell the galaxy what happened here." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 17 Valdorian ships limped away from the Sol system, their hulls cracked, their crews broken. Behind them, they left the wreckage of the most powerful fleet in galactic history. But Chen knew this was just the beginning. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the Valdorian flagship." Admiral Keresh's image appeared on the main screen. His perfect crystalline features were cracked, leaking blue fluid. His 6 arms shook with rage and terror. "This is not over, human. You have doomed your species. The hegemony will return with 10 times this number. 100 times. We will burn your world to ash and scatter your atoms across the void." Chen stepped forward, her small frame somehow filling the screen with menace. "Admiral," she said, voice calm as death itself, "you just made the biggest mistake in galactic history." Keresh's broken laugh echoed through the transmission. "Mistake? You primitive savages just attacked the rightful rulers of this galaxy. What mistake could we have possibly made?" Chen's smile was winter cold. "You left survivors." The transmission cut. In the depths of space, the fleeing Valdorian ships carried news of the disaster back to their home systems. But they carried something else, too. Something they didn't know about. Hidden in their hull breaches, microscopic human drones clung to the wreckage. Self-replicating, self-improving, designed by minds that had turned warfare into an art form. As the ships jumped to hyperspace, the drones began their work. Learning. Adapting. Spreading. 3 months later, the Valdorian core worlds received a message on every frequency, in every language, broadcast from their own compromised systems. A human woman, small and scarred, sitting in what appeared to be a simple military bunker. Behind her, displays showed fleet movements, star charts, tactical analyses. The accumulated intelligence of 1,000 defeated species. "My name is General Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," she began. "By now, you've realized your networks have been compromised. Your fleet positions are known. Your defense grids have been mapped. Your allies have been contacted." The image shifted, showing human ships emerging from hyperspace around Valdorian colonies. Not the primitive chemical rockets their scouts had reported, but sleek warships that moved like sharks through the void. You see, Admiral Keresh made a fundamental error in judgment. He assumed that because we were primitive, we were weak. Because we were divided, we were vulnerable. Because we were young, we were foolish. The display changed again. Human forces, moving in perfect coordination across a dozen systems. Not conquering, but liberating. Freeing species that had been under Valdorian protection for millennia. What you didn't understand is that humans don't just fight wars. We learn from them. Every conflict teaches us something new. Every defeat makes us stronger. Every victory gives us new tools. Chen leaned forward, eyes like winter storms. You had 3,000 years of peace to make you soft. We had 3,000 years of war to make us hard. The transmission shifted to show Valdorian ships surrendering without a fight. Their crews, demoralized and broken, offering no resistance to human boarding parties. Your empire is finished. Not because we destroyed it, but because we offered your subjects something better. Freedom. Self-determination. The right to choose their own path. The image returned to Chen, sitting calmly in her bunker. You want to know what humans are? We're the species that looked at a planet full of predators and decided we were the apex. We're the ones who turned warfare into science and science into art. We're the species that spent our entire history learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. She stood, uniform crisp despite the chaos her words had unleashed across the galaxy. And now, Admiral Keresh, you've given us the biggest prey of all. An entire galactic empire that forgot how to fight. The transmission cut to black. Then text appeared, in every language known to the Valdorian databases. The Terran Federation offers alliance to all free species. Join us in building a galaxy based on cooperation, not domination. Choose your own path. The age of empires is over. Admiral Keresh stared at the empty screen in his ruined command center. Around him, the reports continued to pour in. Fleet after fleet either destroyed or defected. Colony after colony, declaring independence. The hegemony that had ruled for 3 millennia was crumbling in a matter of months. His aide, the nervous Thraxian, approached with shaking hands. Admiral, the Council is requesting your immediate return to face inquiry. They're saying this is your fault. That you provoked a war we couldn't win. Keresh laughed, a sound like grinding glass. My fault. I followed protocol. I did exactly what we've done 1,000 times before. But sir, the humans were supposed to be primitive. Keresh screamed, his perfect composure finally shattering. They were supposed to kneel. Every species kneels. The aide said nothing. What was there to say? The galaxy had changed forever, and they'd been the ones to change it. In her bunker on Earth, General Chen watched the collapse of the Valdorian hegemony with quiet satisfaction. It had taken 6 months, but the job was nearly done. The last of their fleets had surrendered or been destroyed. Their colonies were free. Their empire was dust. "Ma'am," her communications officer said, "we're receiving messages from over 200 species. They want to join the Federation." Chen nodded. "Process them. But remember, no one gets forced in. We're not building another empire. We're building something better." She turned to the tactical display, where human ships patrolled the former Valdorian space. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. Protecting the weak, preserving the peace, ensuring that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. "Ma'am, if I may ask, how did we do it? How did we defeat an empire that had ruled for 3,000 years? Chen smiled, but it wasn't the cold smile she'd worn during the war. This one was warmer, sadder, touched with the weight of history. "They made the oldest mistake in the book, son. They underestimated their enemy. They saw our primitive technology and assumed we were primitive. They saw our divided planet and assumed we were weak. They saw our young civilization and assumed we were naive." She gestured to the display, where the remnants of Valdorian power continued to crumble. What they didn't see was that every human war had been a learning experience. Every defeat had taught us something new. Every victory had made us stronger. They thought they were facing a primitive species with crude weapons. Her expression hardened. They were actually facing the descendants of every warrior who'd ever lived. The inheritors of every tactical innovation, every strategic breakthrough, every lesson written in blood on 10,000 battlefields. The communications officer nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" Chen turned back to the display, where former Valdorian colonies were already beginning to rebuild, free for the first time in millennia. "Now we do what humans have always done," she said quietly. "We adapt. We learn. We grow. And we make sure this never happens again." 5 years later, the Terran Federation stretched across half the galaxy. Not as conquerors, but as allies. Not as rulers, but as partners. Species that had been enslaved for millennia were free to pursue their own destinies. In a small museum on Earth, a display case held the remains of Admiral Keresh's command staff. Not his body, he'd been tried by his own people and executed for his failure, but his personal effects. His ceremonial weapons. His medals of conquest. The placard beside the display was simple, in memory of the Valdorian hegemony, which ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years until they made one fatal mistake: they threatened humanity's home. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the exhibit. To understand how a primitive species from a backwater world had brought down the mightiest empire in history. The tour guide, a young human woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, always ended her presentation the same way: the Valdorians weren't evil. They weren't monsters. They were just complacent. They'd forgotten that every empire falls eventually. They'd forgotten that somewhere in the galaxy, there's always someone hungrier, someone angrier, someone who wants it more. She gestured to the artifacts, the remnants of a dead civilization. They forgot that humans don't just fight wars. We perfect them. And when you've spent your entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things that want to kill you, well. She'd smile, that gentle, terrible smile that every human seemed to carry. Let's just say it was the galaxy's biggest mistake. But it won't be repeated. We'll make sure of that. Outside the museum, former Valdorian subjects walked freely through human cities. Children of a dozen species played together in parks where monuments to liberation stood proudly in the sun. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans weren't primitive. They weren't weak. They weren't naive. They were the species that had looked at an entire galactic empire and said, no. And that had made all the difference. In the depths of space, Admiral Keresh's final log entry played on an endless loop in the wreckage of his flagship. Personal note, final entry. I don't understand how we lost. We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior tactics. We had 3,000 years of experience ruling the galaxy. How could a primitive species from a backwater world defeat us so completely? A pause. The sound of alarms in the background. I keep thinking about what their general said. That we'd made the biggest mistake in galactic history. I still don't understand what she meant. What mistake? We followed protocol. We did everything right. Another pause. Longer this time. Unless that was the mistake. Thinking there was a protocol for humanity. Thinking we could treat them like every other species we'd conquered. Thinking that because they were young, they were weak. The sound of hull breaches. Emergency klaxons. The death of an empire. Maybe the mistake was thinking they were just another species to be conquered. Maybe the mistake was not realizing that humans are something else entirely. The log cut to static. In the silence of space, the message was clear. The galaxy had learned what happens when you threaten humanity's home. It wasn't a lesson they'd soon forget. And Earth, that small blue planet in an unremarkable system, continued to spin peacefully in the void, protected by the descendants of every warrior who'd ever drawn breath, ever held a weapon, ever stood between civilization and chaos. The galaxy's biggest mistake had become humanity's greatest victory. And the stars themselves seemed to whisper a warning to any who might dare repeat it, here be humans. Proceed with caution.